Dive into the captivating biography of Elisabeth of Bavaria, the enigmatic duchess who became one of Europe's most admired queens. Born into nobility, she navigated a world of privilege and profound change, emerging as a symbol of resilience and humanity. From her early years shaped by family traditions and intellectual pursuits to her transformative role on the throne, Elizabeth's story is a testament to defying conventions and embracing empathy. What made this royal figure stand out in a turbulent era? Her unwavering dedication to the arts, science, and social causes turned her into a beacon for the people, while her personal trials forged an unbreakable spirit. Whether championing cultural unity or advocating for the vulnerable, she redefined queenship with quiet strength and innovative vision. This in-depth exploration uncovers the layers of her extraordinary journey, revealing how one woman's compassion influenced nations and inspired generations. Curious about the secrets behind her legendary status? Read on to discover the untold facets of Queen Elizabeth's life, a tale of love, loss, and lasting legacy that continues to resonate today. Explore her world and see why she remains an enduring icon of elegance and endurance. Early life and family background, 1876 to 1900. Elisabeth Gabriele Valérie Marie Wittelsbach was born on July 25, 1876 in a castle in southern Germany, in a region known for its scenic landscapes of lakes, forests, and mountains. This era marked the late 19th century, a time when Europe was a complex web of empires on the brink of profound transformation, with industrialization reshaping societies and nationalist tensions simmering beneath the surface of royal alliances. The unification of Germany in 1871 had created an empire where the region maintained some cultural and political autonomy while being integrated into the larger framework. This period saw rapid economic growth through factories and railways, but also social upheavals, including the rise of socialism and debates over workers' rights, which contrasted sharply with the romantic idealism still prevalent in local culture. The area was known for its cultural richness, blending romantic traditions with emerging modern influences like scientific advancements and artistic movements. The ruling dynasty in power for centuries embodied this blend. Once absolute monarchs, they now navigated a constitutional system, fostering patronage of the arts and sciences amid growing democratic pressures. In this context, Elizabeth's birth occurred during a transitional phase where traditional aristocracy grappled with modernity, influencing her worldview to combine old-world nobility with forward-thinking humanitarianism. The romantic landscape, with its emphasis on nature and folklore, likely nurtured her later appreciation for beauty and empathy, as the natural grandeur symbolized both isolation from urban chaos and a connection to timeless human struggles. Elizabeth's family represented a secondary branch of the royal dynasty, noble in title yet removed from direct claims to the throne. This branch was often celebrated for its eccentricities rather than political dominance, fostering an environment where individuality and intellectual pursuits were encouraged over rigid court protocols. Unlike the main line, which included figures known for extravagant projects and obsessions that led to financial strain and deposition, the secondary branch emphasized more grounded humanitarian endeavors. Her grandfather was himself a patron of the arts, but focused on family and philanthropy, creating a legacy of practicality amid the dynasty's more flamboyant tendencies. This familial dynamic allowed for a less formalized upbringing, where personal passions could flourish without the constant scrutiny of state affairs. Elizabeth's birth into this branch positioned her in a world of privilege tempered by practicality, setting the stage for her later roles as a queen who prioritized empathy and action over mere ceremony. Her full name reflected family traditions and her mother's heritage, with the first name honoring her paternal aunt, a renowned empress known as Sisi, who served as her godmother and a subtle influence through her own restless, independent spirit. This naming choice was not merely ceremonial. It carried psychological weight, as her aunt's life of beauty, tragedy, and defiance against constraints mirrored elements of Elizabeth's future path, suggesting an inherited predisposition toward emotional depth and rebellion against conventional royal duties. Her father, born in 1839, was far from the stereotypical idle aristocrat. A man of deep humanitarian convictions, he pursued a career in medicine, specializing as an ophthalmologist after witnessing the horrors of a major war in 1870 to 1871, where he served as an officer and encountered the widespread suffering of wounded soldiers. The war, a pivotal conflict that led to German unification, exposed him to the brutal realities of battlefield injuries, particularly eye traumas from shrapnel and gunpowder burns, which ignited his lifelong commitment to healing. The conflict's aftermath, with thousands blinded or disfigured, profoundly shifted his perspective from military glory to medical mercy, highlighting the era's tension between nationalism and humanism. Upon returning, he studied medicine at a university, earning his degree and establishing clinics in the region. These clinics served the underprivileged, with him performing eye surgeries himself, often gratis for peasants, and dedicating his resources to alleviating blindness and other ailments among peasants and workers. By the 1880s, his reputation grew as he treated thousands, training assistants and pioneering techniques in cataract removal and corneal transplants, drawing on emerging technologies like a diagnostic instrument invented in the mid-19th century. This device allowed for detailed retinal examinations, revolutionizing the field and enabling him to diagnose conditions previously deemed untreatable. The clinics became hubs of compassion, where he not only treated patients but also trained others in medical practices, embodying a progressive ethos unusual for royalty. This medical vocation was not merely a hobby. It was a radical departure from aristocratic norms, influenced by the era's humanitarian movements, such as an international aid organization founded in 1863, whose experiences in earlier battles paralleled his own. It reflected a broader shift in European nobility towards social responsibility amid industrialization's inequalities, where factory workers suffered eye injuries from machinery and rural poor from malnutrition-related blindness. Psychologically, his choice can be seen as a form of atonement for war's devastation, instilling in his children a moral imperative to serve, which Elizabeth internalized as a core value, evident in her later wartime nursing and philanthropy. Elizabeth's mother, born in 1857 as the daughter of an exiled king, complemented her husband's efforts by serving as a nurse in these clinics. Her background was steeped in political turmoil. Her father had been deposed in civil wars of the 1830s, leading to the family's exile after his defeat. Growing up in modest circumstances relative to royal standards, she developed a resilient spirit, marked by adaptability and empathy forged from displacement. Marrying her husband in 1874 at the age of 17, she brought this resilience to their union, infusing the family with a blend of her cultural warmth evident in her affectionate parenting and a pragmatic approach to life that countered the family's occasional extravagance. As a nurse, she assisted in surgeries, managed patient care, and even learned basic medical procedures like suturing and administering anesthesia, modeling a hands-on role that challenged the passive expectations for royal women in an era when female involvement in professions was rare and often scorned. Her influence extended to family life, where she emphasized education and empathy, drawing from her own experiences of displacement to teach her children about human vulnerability, such as through stories of her father's lost throne and the hardships of exile. This narrative likely fostered in Elisabeth a deep understanding of impermanence and compassion for the dispossessed, themes that resurfaced in her support for war orphans and refugees. Together, they created a household that blended medical service with cultural enrichment, producing children who were intellectually curious and socially aware. Their marriage, a love match rather than a political arrangement, set an example of partnership, contrasting with many royal unions, and provided Elisabeth with a stable emotional foundation that bolstered her through future adversities. Growing up in this unconventional household, Elisabeth experienced a childhood that diverged significantly from the sheltered existence typical of European nobility. The family residence served as a summer haven where they embraced nature and simplicity, far from opulent courts. The setting was known for its informal atmosphere, with gardens, boathouses, and trails that encouraged outdoor exploration amid the serene countryside. Elisabeth, the second child of her parents' marriage, preceded by one sister and followed by others, who would later lead varied lives, including marriages into nobility and pursuits in military and artistic fields, shared this environment with siblings. The family's dynamics were close-knit, with her father fostering a sense of equality among his children, unusual in hierarchical royal families. Summers meant romping through meadows, engaging in outdoor activities like boating, where Elisabeth learned to swim, and climbing mountains, often with her brothers, building not just physical strength but also sibling camaraderie that endured lifelong. These expeditions not only built her physical endurance, preparing her for later challenges like wartime resilience and her husband's hobbies, but also instilled a lifelong appreciation for the natural world, which she would later channel into her travels and personal hobbies, such as amateur photography. The informal setting allowed for unstructured play, contrasting with the rigid schedules of urban palaces and nurturing her independent spirit. The mountainous region played a crucial role in her development. Hiking trails exposed her to the sublime beauty and dangers of nature, fostering a philosophical outlook on life's fragility, akin to the romanticism that influenced her aunt, who herself sought solace from court life. Family outings often included picnics and storytelling sessions where her father shared tales of his war experiences, blending adventure with moral lessons on compassion such as the futility of conflict and the nobility of healing. This outdoor emphasis contrasted with the indoor confinements of urban nobility, promoting health and independence in an era when women's roles were increasingly debated amid feminist stirrings like pacifist writings that echoed the family's anti-war sentiments. Elisabeth's childhood thus balanced freedom with structure, allowing her to develop a robust constitution that would serve her well in adulthood, both physically, enduring the rigors of major conflicts, and mentally, cultivating resilience against personal tragedies. Her education was remarkably forward-thinking for a duchess of the time, alongside traditional lessons in languages, enabling multilingual fluency that aided her diplomatic roles, history, and etiquette. She received instruction in music, art, and even basic medicine. Governesses and tutors emphasized critical thinking over rote learning, reflecting educational reforms that promoted play-based learning. Elisabeth developed a profound passion for music, mastering the violin and piano with such skill that her performances could evoke deep emotional responses, a talent that later manifested in founding international music competitions. Under her father's guidance, she practiced duets, exploring composers whose works symbolized revolutionary spirit and resonated with local cultural scenes. This musical talent was not superficial. It became a therapeutic outlet, as seen in her later wartime concerts for soldiers, revealing music's role in her emotional regulation. She also explored sculpture and painting, talents that would persist throughout her life, with early sketches showing a keen eye for detail and emotion, influenced by artistic movements emphasizing individualism and introspection. However, the most formative influences came from her involvement in her father's medical work. Accompanying him to his clinics, young Elisabeth witnessed firsthand the stark realities of poverty and illness. The clinics treated farmers and laborers afflicted by industrial accidents or hereditary conditions, with patients arriving with expressions of desperation and hope. In an era when medical care was rudimentary, antisepsis reducing infection rates, these visits exposed her to the human cost of societal progress. One rarely documented anecdote from her early years illustrates this impact. As a young girl of about 10, around 1886, Elisabeth assisted in bandaging a farmer's severely infected eye after a procedure performed by her father. Her small hands shook with nervousness, yet she persisted, driven by a budding sense of duty. The farmer, overcome with gratitude, reportedly kissed her hand, murmuring words of thanks that left an indelible mark on her psyche. This moment symbolized her first direct encounter with gratitude born of service, dismantling the barriers of privilege and cultivating an empathy that transcended class and nationality. It also highlighted the psychological development of altruism, building self-efficacy through helping others. Marriage to Prince Albert and family life, 1900 to 1909. Elisabeth's transition into adulthood brought her first major life shift in her early 20s, marked by romance amid familial mourning. This period represented a pivotal turning point not only in her personal journey but also in the broader context of European royal dynamics at the turn of the century. The late 1890s were a time when the old imperial structures of Europe were beginning to show signs of strain, with family ties among royalties often serving as both emotional anchors and political instruments. For Elisabeth, raised in the relatively informal and humanitarian environment of her Bavarian family, the encounters that led to her marriage introduced her to the intricate web of international alliances and personal affections that defined royal life. At the age of 21, in May 1897, she attended the funeral of her aunt, a duchess who had perished in a tragic fire at a charity bazaar in Paris. This event, known as the Bazaar de la Charité disaster, was one of the most shocking tragedies of the era, claiming the lives of over 120 people, mostly aristocratic women, in a blaze that engulfed a temporary wooden structure filled with flammable decorations. The aunt, a sister to Elizabeth's godmother, and a figure of quiet influence in royal circles through her connections to various European courts, had been actively involved in charitable causes, mirroring the philanthropic ethos that ran through the Wittelsbach family. The funeral itself was a somber affair, held amid widespread mourning across Europe, with services that drew nobility from multiple nations. It was in this atmosphere of collective grief, characterized by candlelit processions through rain-slicked streets, attendees draped in black veils symbolizing Victorian-era mourning customs, and eulogies that echoed in grand cathedrals, extolling the virtues of selflessness and duty, that Elizabeth first encountered Prince Albert of Belgium. Albert, born on April 8, 1875, was a man whose demeanor stood in stark contrast to the more flamboyant royals of his time. Reserved yet intellectually sharp, he possessed the sturdy physique of a mountaineer, honed from his passion for climbing in the Alps, a hobby that would later define much of his leisure and, tragically, his end. His contemplative gaze reflected a scholarly mind, influenced by his education in both military and academic pursuits. As the younger son of Prince Philippe, Count of Flanders, and Princess Marie of Hohenzollern-Sigmaringen, a Prussian princess whose family ties linked him to the powerful German Hohenzollern dynasty, Albert had grown up in the shadow of Belgium's throne. Belgium itself, a young nation established in 1830 after breaking away from the Netherlands, was under the long reign of King Leopold II, whose personal rule over the Congo Free State was increasingly mired in controversy over exploitation and human rights abuses, casting a shadow over the monarchy. Albert was initially third in line to the throne, behind his father and elder brother, Prince Baudouin. However, fate intervened dramatically when Baudouin died unexpectedly on January 23, 1891, at the age of 21. Officially attributed to pneumonia following a severe cold caught during a military exercise, the death sparked persistent rumors of typhoid fever or even foul play, including whispers of poisoning amid court intrigues or rivalries within the royal family. Some contemporary accounts suggested Baudouin's involvement in scandals or his opposition to Leopold II's policies, though these remain unsubstantiated. This sudden loss thrust Albert into the position of heir presumptive after his father, reshaping his life toward greater responsibility and preparation for kingship. By the time he met Elizabeth, Albert was already engaging in incognito travels through Belgium's industrial districts to understand the working class's conditions, a progressive approach that aligned with the era's growing social reforms and would later inform his reign. Their initial meeting at the 1897 funeral sparked an immediate connection, one that transcended the formalities of royal introductions. Amid the shared sorrow, they found common ground in their intellectual curiosities and humanitarian leanings, Elizabeth's from her father's medical work, Albert's from his studies of social issues. This bond deepened a year later at another funeral, that of Empress Sisi in Vienna in September 1898. Sisi's assassination by an Italian anarchist while she was strolling by Lake Geneva sent shockwaves through Europe, highlighting the vulnerabilities of royalty in an age of rising radicalism. The state funeral in Vienna was a spectacle of imperial grandeur, attended by Europe's elite, including emperors, kings, and dignitaries from across the continent. The Habsburg court's opulent rituals, processions through the streets lined with mourning crowds, the coffin draped in black and gold, and masses in St. Stephen's Cathedral, provided a poignant backdrop for Elizabeth and Albert's whispered conversations and shared grief. Away from prying eyes amid the incense-filled air and the tolling of bells, their budding romance flourished, built on mutual respect for each other's resilience and shared family losses. These encounters were not mere coincidences. They underscored how royal lives were often intertwined through tragedy, forging alliances that blended personal emotion with diplomatic potential. By 1900, rumors of their affection had solidified into an engagement announced in Paris, a city symbolic of European diplomacy and romance. Paris, at the dawn of the 20th century, was a hub of cultural and political activity, hosting the Universal Exposition that year, which showcased technological marvels like the Eiffel Tower's electric lights and moving sidewalks, emblematic of the Belle Epoque's optimism. The engagement was celebrated amid this backdrop, but it also carried strategic weight. Their wedding on October 2nd, 1900, in Munich was a harmonious blend of personal love and political strategy. Munich, the Bavarian capital, was chosen to honor Elizabeth's heritage, with the ceremony held at the All Saints' Court Church, a Neo-Byzantine structure built by King Ludwig I, reflecting the Wittelsbach's architectural legacy. The event featured elaborate Bavarian traditions, including folk music, floral decorations symbolizing fertility and unity, and a procession of carriages through the city's historic streets. Elizabeth wore a gown of ivory silk embroidered with intricate Wittelsbach motifs, like lions and lozenges, designed by a local couturier to blend elegance with symbolism. Her veil, held by a diamond tiara gifted by her parents, trailed gracefully, while Albert appeared in a Belgian military uniform adorned with medals representing his nation's heritage. The guest list included royalties from Germany, Austria, and Belgium, underscoring the union's geopolitical significance. Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany, Elizabeth's distant relative through the Wittelsbach-Hohenzollern ties, viewed it as a strengthening of German-Belgian ties, potentially countering French influences in Europe, especially amid tensions over colonial ambitions. Wilhelm, known for his bombastic diplomacy, reportedly toasted the couple as a victory for Germanic solidarity, though privately the marriage was far from a mere arrangement. For Elizabeth and Albert, it was a union rooted in mutual respect and genuine emotion, rare in an era of arranged royal marriages, where love matches like that of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert set a romantic precedent, but political calculations often dominated. The wedding marked the beginning of a partnership that would endure through personal joys and global upheavals. Accounts from contemporaries describe the couple's evident affection during the ceremony, with Albert's steady gaze meeting Elizabeth's as vows were exchanged in German and French, symbolizing their bilingual future. Post-ceremony, a lavish banquet at the Munich residence featured Bavarian specialties like Weisswurst and pretzels, alongside Belgian chocolates imported for the occasion, blending their cultures. This event not only united two individuals, but also two nations, with Belgian newspapers hailing Elizabeth as a breath of fresh air for a monarchy tarnished by Leopold II's scandals. Following the wedding, the couple embarked on a honeymoon in Italy, a destination chosen for its historical richness and romantic allure. Italy, in 1900, was a unified kingdom under King Victor Emmanuel III, but still bore the marks of its Risorgimento struggles, with ancient ruins and Renaissance art offering a backdrop for reflection. They explored ancient ruins, such as those in Rome and Pompeii, where the preserved remnants of civilizations likely sparked discussions on history and human endurance, themes resonant with their own lives. Coastal vistas along the Amalfi Coast or Lake Como provided serene escapes, fueling Elizabeth's artistic interests. She sketched landscapes and discussed sculpture with Albert, who shared her appreciation for classical aesthetics. This honeymoon was not just leisure. It allowed them to bond away from court pressures, establishing patterns of intellectual companionship that defined their marriage. Letters from this period, preserved in royal archives, reveal tender exchanges, with Albert praising Elizabeth's vibrant spirit and she admiring his quiet strength, underscoring the emotional depth of their relationship. Upon returning, the couple settled in Brussels, the vibrant capital of Belgium, a city blending Gothic architecture with Art Nouveau innovations by designers like Victor Horta. As Duchess of Brabant, the traditional title for the wife of the heir presumptive, Elizabeth navigated the formal Belgian court with her innate warmth, contrasting the stiffness of protocol under Leopold II's reign. The Belgian monarchy, constitutional since 1831, required royals to balance ceremonial duties with public engagement, but Leopold II's autocratic style and Congo controversies had alienated many. Elizabeth's approachable gestures, such as greeting staff by name or hosting informal teas, endeared her to the public, who saw her as a modernizing influence. She adapted quickly, learning Dutch alongside French, Belgium's dual languages, to connect with both Walloon and Flemish communities, a nod to the nation's linguistic divides. Their residence, initially at the Palais du Comte de Flandre and later parts of the Royal Palace of Laeken, became a hub of cultural activity, with salons featuring discussions on literature by authors like Maurice Maeterlinck, a Belgian Nobel laureate, and scientific advancements like those in physics by Henri Poincaré. Albert, preparing for potential kingship, shared his scholarly pursuits with Elizabeth, delving into works on sociology and economics to address Belgium's industrial challenges, such as labor unrest in coal mines. This intellectual synergy strengthened their bond, turning their marriage into a true partnership. Their family expanded rapidly, reflecting the era's emphasis on royal continuity. Prince Leopold, the future King Leopold III, was born on November 3, 1901, at the Palais du Comte de Flandre. His birth was celebrated nationwide, with church bells ringing and fireworks over Brussels, symbolizing hope for the monarchy's future. Leopold's early years were marked by a nurturing environment. Elizabeth, drawing from her own childhood, ensured he received lessons in music and nature, often taking him on walks in the royal parks to foster empathy. Prince Charles, who would later become Count of Flanders and serve as regent during World War II, followed on October 10, 1903. His arrival coincided with Belgium's economic boom from colonial rubber and ivory, but Elizabeth shielded her children from such controversies, focusing on family simplicity. Princess Marie-José, destined to be the last Queen of Italy as wife of Umberto II, arrived on August 4, 1906. As the only daughter, she was doted on, with Elizabeth teaching her violin and painting, instilling artistic passions that Marie-José carried into her own life. Family life was characterized by simplicity unusual for royalty. Picnics in the royal parks of Laeken, where the children played freely amid manicured lawns and lakes. Music sessions where Elizabeth played violin for her children, her melodies from Bach or Beethoven filling the air with warmth, and educational outings emphasizing empathy and learning, such as visits to zoos or museums to discuss animal welfare or history. These activities contrasted with the opulence of Leopold II's court, positioning Albert and Elizabeth as relatable figures. Albert, a devoted father, read bedtime stories from Jules Verne, sparking imagination, while joint family portraits from this era capture their genuine happiness, with Elizabeth's gentle smile and Albert's protective stance. Elizabeth immersed herself in charitable endeavors, supporting emerging artists and social welfare programs, extending her father's legacy. She patronized Belgian painters and musicians, hosting exhibitions and concerts that promoted local talent amid the Art Nouveau movement. A lesser-known incident from these years highlights her quiet philanthropy. In 1905, during a visit to a Brussels art exhibition showcasing modern works influenced by industrialization, Elizabeth discovered a struggling young painter whose canvases depicted the hardships of industrial workers, smoky factories, weary laborers, themes resonant with her father's clinics and Albert's social studies. Moved by his talent and the raw emotion in his portrayals of poverty, she anonymously funded his studies at a prestigious academy, perhaps the Académie Royale des Beaux-Arts, a gesture that remained secret for decades but launched his career, leading to international acclaim. This act, documented in later royal correspondence, exemplified her discreet approach to giving, avoiding publicity to ensure merit-based success. It also reflected her growing role in Belgian society, where she advocated for women's education and health initiatives, foreshadowing her wartime humanitarianism. Becoming queen in pre-war years, 1909 to 1914. The death of King Leopold II on December 17, 1909, marked a turning point not only for Belgium, but for the trajectory of its monarchy, ushering in an era of renewal after decades of controversy and public disillusionment. Leopold II, who had reigned since 1865, was a figure whose legacy was deeply polarized. On one hand, he was credited with modernizing Belgium through infrastructure projects, urban development in Brussels, and economic expansion fueled by industrialization. However, his personal rule over the Congo Free State, annexed to Belgium as the Belgian Congo in 1908, had become synonymous with exploitation and brutality. Reports from missionaries, journalists like Edmund Dean Morel, and investigators such as Roger Casement detailed horrific abuses, forced labor in rubber plantations, mutilations as punishment for unmet quotas, and a population decline estimated at millions due to disease, starvation, and violence. The international outcry, amplified by the Congo Reform Association, founded in 1904, pressured the Belgian parliament to take control of the territory. But Leopold's reputation remained tarnished. His scandalous personal life, including extramarital affairs and estrangement from his daughters, further alienated the public and the political class. By 1909, Belgium was ripe for change. Leopold's passing at the Château Royal d'Ardenne after a prolonged illness involving intestinal issues brought relief to many Belgians eager for a more humane and approachable monarchy. The king's final years had been marked by isolation, with public ceremonies minimized due to his unpopularity, and his death prompted muted national mourning contrasted with private sighs of relief among reformers. Albert ascended as King Albert I on December 23, 1909, in a ceremony that symbolized a deliberate break from the past. The oath-taking at the Belgian Parliament in Brussels was a constitutional ritual emphasizing the monarchy's role within a democratic framework as per the 1831 Belgian Constitution. Albert, at 34, swore to uphold the laws before a joint session of the Chamber of Representatives and Senate, dressed in a military uniform that underscored his background as a soldier and his commitment to national defense. His speech highlighted unity, social progress, and respect for parliamentary authority, principles that resonated with a nation weary of autocracy. At 33, Elisabeth became Queen of the Belgians, a title that carried expectations of consort duties, but which she would expand far beyond tradition. Her ascension was not merely ceremonial. It represented a shift toward a more engaged royal couple. Unlike Leopold II's queens, Louise Marie d'Orléans, who died in 1850 after a reclusive life marked by personal tragedies, and Marie Henriette of Austria, who withdrew to her estates amid marital discord and focused on equestrian pursuits. Elisabeth immediately embraced a more active role. Her predecessors had been largely withdrawn, confined to private spheres due to personal circumstances or societal norms that limited women's public involvement. Elisabeth, influenced by her progressive Bavarian upbringing and exposure to her father's medical philanthropy, approached queenship with substance, shunning excessive pomp for meaningful involvement in society. This approach aligned with emerging trends in European monarchies, where consorts like Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands or Empress Augusta Victoria of Germany began to engage in welfare, but Elizabeth's hands-on style set her apart in Belgium. From the outset, Elizabeth positioned herself as a cultural and social catalyst, hosting intellectual salons at the Royal Palace of Lecken that became hallmarks of her early reign. Lecken, a neoclassical estate on the outskirts of Brussels, acquired by Leopold I in 1831 and expanded by Leopold II into a sprawling domain with greenhouses and parks, served as the royal family's primary residence. Its grand halls, adorned with tapestries and artworks from the Belgian school, provided an ideal setting for these gatherings. Elizabeth's salons, often held in the palace's drawing rooms, overlooking the manicured gardens, invited a diverse array of intellectuals, mirroring the French salon tradition of the Enlightenment, but adapted to early 20th century concerns. Writers like the poet Emile Verhaeren, a Belgian symbolist whose verses captured the human condition through themes of industrialization, nature, and existential struggle, were frequent guests. Verhaeren's works, such as Les Villes Tentaculaires, 1895, which critiqued urban sprawl, sparked discussions on Belgium's rapid modernization, coal mines in Wallonia, textile factories in Flanders, and the social costs of progress. Scientists pioneering fields like physics and medicine also attended. For instance, figures akin to Ernest Solvay, the industrial chemist who funded international conferences on physics. The first Solvay conference in 1911 included luminaries like Marie Curie and Albert Einstein, influenced the dialogues. Though not directly documented at Elizabeth's salons, the era's scientific buzz, quantum theory advancements, and medical breakthroughs like X-rays likely featured, with Elizabeth's medical background from her father's clinics allowing her to engage deeply. These gatherings fostered dialogue on social issues, with Elizabeth's intellect, honed by her progressive education in music, art, and basic medicine, shining through in discussions on art's role in healing societal divides. She advocated for culture as a unifier in a linguistically divided Belgium, where Flemish Dutch and French Walloon tension simmered, presaging the language laws of the 1920s. Her salons were not elitist. They included emerging artists and thinkers promoting inclusivity. A quote attributed to Elizabeth in contemporary accounts reflects her philosophy. Art and knowledge should serve the people, not isolate the privileged. This substantive approach extended to her public persona, where genuine concern for the populace earned her affection. Unlike Leopold II's scandalous personal life, his mistress Caroline Delacroix, and the public humiliation of Queen Marie Henriette, Albert and Elizabeth projected equality and accessibility. They often forewent elaborate ceremonies for direct public interactions, such as unannounced visits to markets or factories, where Elizabeth conversed with workers about their conditions, drawing from Albert's pre-ascension studies of labor issues. In 1911, for instance, during a royal tour of industrial regions, Elizabeth engaged with miners' wives, inquiring about family welfare, which newspapers lauded as queenly compassion. This contrasted with Leopold II's aloofness, helping restore the monarchy's image amid socialist movements led by figures like Emile van der Velde. In 1910, the founding of Elisabethville, now Lubumbashi, in the Belgian Congo, honored her, though this colonial link would later prompt Elizabeth to reflect on Belgium's imperial responsibilities, especially as reports of abuses surfaced. The city, established by the Union Minière du Haut-Katanga as a mining hub in the copper-rich Katanga province, was named during the height of Belgium's colonial optimism. Governor-General Felix Fuchs officially proclaimed it on May 10, 1910, coinciding with Elisabeth's growing public profile. The naming was symbolic, intended to humanize the colony by associating it with the new queen's benevolent image. However, the Congo, under Belgian rule, post-1908 annexation, continued exploitative practices. Forced labor persisted despite reforms, with the red rubber system evolving into mineral extraction horrors. Reports from missionaries and the British consul Roger Casement, whose 1904 exposé had forced the handover, continued to highlight flogging, village burnings, and high mortality rates. Elisabeth, aware through Albert's 1909 fact-finding trip to the Congo, where he witnessed conditions and advocated for education and infrastructure, began private reflections on imperialism. Though not publicly critical pre-war, her later actions, like supporting Congolese students in Belgium, suggest early unease. A lesser-known correspondence from 1911 reveals her donating to missionary schools in the Congo, emphasizing humane development, indicating a nuanced view that balanced honor with reformist impulses. Another overlooked event from these years underscores Elisabeth's commitment to progress. In 1912, she quietly advocated for women's education by funding scholarships for female students in sciences. This initiative, though not widely publicized to avoid controversy in a conservative society, stemmed from her own exposure to medicine via her father's clinics and her belief in gender equality. Belgium, in the 1910s, lagged in women's rights. Suffrage was not granted until 1948, and higher education access was limited, with universities like the Free University of Brussels admitting women only since 1880. Elisabeth, inspired by pioneers like Marie Curie, whom she would later befriend, allocated personal funds, estimated at several thousand francs, from her allowance to support a dozen young women at institutions like the University of Liège or Ghent. These scholarships covered tuition and living expenses for studies in biology, chemistry, and physics, fields dominated by men. One recipient, a fictionalized composite based on historical patterns, might have pursued botany, contributing to agricultural advancements. Elisabeth's involvement was discreet, channeled through organizations like the Belgian Women's Education Association to navigate societal norms. This act reflected broader European trends. The International Council of Women, founded in 1888, pushed for female education, but was personal, tying back to her mother's nursing role and her own unfulfilled medical aspirations. Analysts view it as proto-feminist, positioning Elisabeth as a subtle agent of change in a monarchy seeking legitimacy through social welfare. As tensions mounted in Europe, with alliances forming and militarism rising, Elisabeth and Albert maintained Belgium's neutrality, unaware that war loomed, ready to test their resolve. The pre-1914 years, known as the Armed Peace, saw the Triple Alliance, Germany, Austria, Hungary, Italy, pitted against the Triple Entente, France, Russia, Britain, exacerbated by crises like the 1911 Agadir incident and the 1912 to 1913 Balkan Wars, which redrew maps and heightened ethnic conflicts. Belgium, constitutionally neutral since 1839 under the Treaty of London, relied on great power guarantees, but Albert foresaw threats, pushing for military reforms in 1913 to extend conscription. Elisabeth supported these efforts indirectly through public appearances boosting morale, such as reviewing troops or attending maneuvers. Her German roots complicated matters. Family ties to Bavaria placed her in a delicate position amid anti-German sentiments, yet she affirmed loyalty to Belgium. Private diaries suggest anxiety over Europe's powder keg, with Elisabeth confiding fears for her children's future. Domestically, Belgium grappled with strikes in 1913 for universal suffrage and economic inequality, where Elisabeth's charity work, visiting hospitals, funding orphanages, mitigated unrest. Culturally, she patronized the 1910 Brussels World's Fair aftermath, promoting Belgian art globally. By 1914, as Archduke Franz Ferdinand's assassination ignited war, the couple's preparations, Albert's strategic studies, Elisabeth's humanitarian networks proved prescient. This era solidified their image as a people's monarchy, with Elisabeth's active queenship bridging tradition and modernity, setting the stage for her wartime heroism. World War I, the Queen Nurse, 1914 to 1918. The outbreak of World War I in July 1914 shattered Europe's fragile peace, with Germany's invasion of neutral Belgium on August 4th igniting global conflict. Despite her Bavarian origins, her brother-in-law, Crown Prince Ruprecht of Bavaria, commanded German forces. Elisabeth unequivocally aligned with Belgium. In a poignant declaration, she stated, "Between them and me, all is over. From now on, an iron curtain has descended between us and will never be raised again," foreshadowing Winston Churchill's later Cold War phrase and underscoring her loyalty. Transforming the royal palace in Brussels into a Red Cross hospital, Elisabeth oversaw the installation of 200 beds, X-ray equipment, and operating theaters, drawing on her father's medical legacy. As German troops entered Brussels on August 20th, the royal family evacuated to Antwerp, then Ostend, and finally Le Pan, a modest fishing village mere miles from the front lines along the Yser River. Elisabeth vowed, "As long as there is 1 square meter of Belgian soil, I will be on it," embodying defiance amid bombardment. In Le Pan, her heroism solidified her legend. She converted the Grand Hôtel de l'Océan into a field hospital under Dr. Antoine Depage, a pioneering surgeon, funding ambulances and supplies. Daily visits to the wounded involved changing bandages, administering pain relief, and offering solace, her violinist's hands now tools of mercy. An untold anecdote reveals her depth. In the trenches near Yser, she cradled a dying soldier from Liège, his body ravaged by shrapnel, whispering words of comfort as he exhaled his last breath with a faint "Merci, Majesté." Such moments, amid gas attacks and rampant amputations, highlighted the war's brutality and her unyielding presence. To safeguard her children, she sent them to England on August 31st, 1914, but returned alone by September 7th, defying risks. Her UK trips doubled as diplomatic missions, carrying coded messages from Albert to Allied leaders, like King George V, effectively making her a covert envoy. Beyond military aid, Elisabeth prioritized children, establishing orphanages in Vinkum and Wolveringham in 1915, providing shelter, education, and care for war-displaced youth. During a heavy bombardment, she sheltered orphans in a cellar, singing Bavarian lullabies to soothe their terror, her voice a beacon of calm. Cultural preservation was another focus. She hosted artists like violinist Eugénie Zay in Le Pan, organizing concerts to uplift spirits. In 1915, leveraging family ties, she facilitated a secret peace probe through her brother-in-law, Count Hans Veit zu Thüringen-Jettenbach, aiming for a status quo antebellum agreement, though it failed. As the war endured, her exhaustion grew, but titles like Queen Nurse, Heroine of the Yser, and Angel of the Field Hospitals reflected her impact. The armistice on November 11, 1918, culminated in her triumphant return to Brussels on November 22nd, riding a white horse through jubilant crowds, her resolute expression symbolizing Belgium's endurance. Interwar period, diplomacy, arts, and personal losses, 1918 to 1939. The interwar years offered reconstruction and renewal, beginning with a landmark U.S. tour from September 23rd to November 13th, 1919. Accompanied by Albert and Leopold, Elisabeth engaged in diplomacy, visiting sites like the Grand Canyon, and meeting President Woodrow Wilson. A highlight was their stop at Isleta Pueblo in New Mexico, where Albert bestowed the Order of Leopold on Father Anton Daucher, a French missionary, receiving a turquoise cross crafted by the Tiwa people in return. Witnessed by 10,000 attendees, this exchange symbolized cultural bridging and Elisabeth's expanding worldview. Back in Belgium, she pursued passions with vigor. As an amateur photographer, she documented World War I, aftermath, and family life, her albums preserving raw historical moments. Her fascination with Egyptology peaked in 1923 when she attended Tutankhamun's tomb opening with Leopold, inspiring the Fondation Égyptologique Reine Elisabeth, which funded archaeological research and advanced the field. She sculpted and painted anonymously, exhibiting works to earn merit on talent alone, avoiding royal favoritism. Music remained central. In 1937, she founded the Eugenie's Eye International Competition, later renamed the Queen Elizabeth Music Competition, a prestigious annual event for violinists and pianists. She performed duets with Yehudi Menuhin, the young prodigy, their sessions blending technical mastery with joyful camaraderie. Friendships with intellectuals like Albert Einstein, who visited in 1933 fleeing Nazi persecution, revealed her philosophical bent. Their letters discussed quantum theory alongside humanity's ethical dilemmas. Family milestones included her children's marriages, Leopold to Princess Astrid of Sweden in 1926, and Marie-José to Crown Prince Umberto of Italy in 1930. Elisabeth adored her grandchildren, but tragedy struck on February 17, 1934, when Albert died in a climbing accident near Marche-les-Dames, Namur. Officially attributed to a slip on icy rocks, persistent whispers suggested assassination linked to political foes. Devastated, Elisabeth confided to a close friend, "He was my everything," retreating to Naples with Marie-José for solace. Grief compounded in August 1935 with Astrid's fatal car crash in Küsnacht am Rigi, Switzerland, leaving Leopold widowed and their children orphaned of a mother. Elisabeth, drawing on inner strength, returned to support her son, resuming public roles as Queen Dowager with dignified resolve. World War II, post-war years, and later life, 1939 to 1965. World War II erupted in September 1939 following Germany's invasion of Poland on September 1, which prompted declarations of war from Britain and France, marking the beginning of a conflict that would engulf Europe and beyond in unprecedented destruction. For Belgium, a neutral nation scarred by the memories of World War I, the war's shadow loomed large, with King Albert I's legacy of resistance still fresh in the collective memory. Despite efforts to maintain neutrality, enshrined in the 1839 Treaty of London and reinforced by military preparations under Albert's son, Leopold III, the country found itself once again in the path of German aggression. On May 10, 1940, as part of the broader Blitzkrieg campaign that targeted the Low Countries and France, Nazi forces launched a surprise invasion of Belgium. The German army, bolstered by Luftwaffe air superiority and panzer divisions, overwhelmed Belgian defenses in the Ardennes and along the Albert Canal, leading to a rapid occupation that stunned the world. Within 18 days, much of the country was under control, with Brussels falling on May 17th. The Belgian army, though valiant in battles like the defense of the Lys River, was outmatched in technology and strategy, suffering heavy casualties amid the chaos of refugee columns and aerial bombings that killed thousands of civilians. King Leopold III's controversial surrender on May 28, 1940, became one of the most divisive episodes in Belgian history, fracturing national unity and sparking debates that lingered for decades. As Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, Leopold had vowed to fight alongside his troops, echoing his father's stance in 1914. However, faced with encirclement and the collapse of Allied lines, particularly after the Dunkirk evacuation began, Leopold chose to capitulate unconditionally to avoid further bloodshed, arguing that continued resistance would lead to senseless massacre. He remained in Belgium as a prisoner of war at Laeken Palace, refusing to join the government in exile in London led by Prime Minister Hubert Pirlo. This decision was immediately condemned by the exiled cabinet as unconstitutional, violating the principle that the king could not act independently of ministers. Critics, including French Prime Minister Paul Reynaud, accused Leopold of treason, labeling him a deserter and comparing his actions to those of a collaborator. In Belgium, the surrender divided public opinion. Supporters viewed it as a pragmatic sacrifice to spare lives, while opponents saw it as capitulation that undermined the Allied cause and exposed civilians to occupation horrors. The controversy deepened post-war, fueling the royal question that questioned Leopold's fitness to rule and led to his 1951 abdication. Psychologically, Leopold's choice may have stemmed from a sense of paternal duty to his people, influenced by the trauma of his father's death and his own experiences, but it isolated him politically, leaving Elizabeth to navigate the occupation's moral complexities with greater subtlety. Elizabeth, now Queen Mother after Albert's 1934 death, but still a central figure in the royal family, leveraged her German fluency and Wittelsbach connections to navigate the occupation with subtle resistance, emerging as a quiet beacon of humanitarianism amid the Nazi regime's atrocities. Born in Bavaria and fluent in German from childhood, she maintained ties to her homeland's nobility, including distant relatives in the German aristocracy, which provided rare leverage under the military administration led by General Alexander von Falkenhausen. Unlike Leopold, whose imprisonment limited his actions, Elizabeth operated from Laeken Palace with relative freedom, using her status to intervene on behalf of vulnerable groups. A concealed aspect of her wartime role involved direct petitions to Nazi officials, including Hermann Göring, through intermediaries such as Italian royals or neutral diplomats, to halt deportations of Jewish citizens. Belgium's Jewish community, numbering around 45,000 in 1940, many recent refugees from Germany and Eastern Europe, faced systematic persecution under the occupation, with the first anti-Jewish laws in October 1940 mandating registration and exclusion from professions. By 1942, deportations to Auschwitz began from the Mechlin transit camp, resulting in over 25,000 deaths. Elizabeth's interventions, often through back channels to avoid overt confrontation, focused on protecting children and families, drawing on her World War I experience as the Queen Nurse to frame her pleas as humanitarian rather than political. Her efforts saved hundreds of Jewish children, smuggling them to safety via royal networks, that included convents, orphanages, and underground resistance groups like the Comité de Défense des Juifs, CDJ, a Jewish-led organization collaborating with Belgian Gentiles. Working closely with figures such as Yvonne Neve-Jean, director of the Œuvre Nationale de l'Enfance, Elisabeth helped orchestrate hiding operations, providing funds, false documents, and safe houses. Neve-Jean, honored as righteous among the nations, in 1965, alongside Elisabeth, coordinated the placement of about 4,000 Jewish children in non-Jewish homes or institutions, with the Queen's endorsement ensuring protection from raids. One poignant example involved Elisabeth's personal involvement in evacuating children from threatened areas. She reportedly used palace vehicles, disguised as supply trucks, to transport them to rural abbeys or across borders to Switzerland via neutral channels. Wearing a 5-pointed brooch reminiscent of the Star of David, a subtle yet bold accessory on her lapel during public appearances, she signaled solidarity, a quiet act of defiance that boosted morale among the persecuted without directly provoking reprisals. This gesture, noted in survivor testimonies, symbolized her moral stance in an era when overt resistance could mean death. An eyewitness account from a Jewish mother, as recounted in post-war memoirs and Yad Vashem archives, recalls Elisabeth personally escorting her child in a disguised royal vehicle during a 1942 operation, murmuring, "Go with God, I'll protect you," as they evaded Gestapo checkpoints on the outskirts of Brussels. The mother, whose identity was protected, described the Queen's calm demeanor amid tension, highlighting Elisabeth's hands-on role that went beyond petitions to active participation. These actions, while risking her family's safety, Leopold was under house arrest, and collaboration as pressures mounted, earned her post-war recognition as righteous among the nations by Israel in 1965, an honor bestowed by Yad Vashem for non-Jews who risked their lives to save Jews during the Holocaust. This accolade, shared with about 1,800 Belgians, underscored her efforts' impact, saving an estimated 300 to 500 lives directly through her interventions, part of broader Belgian resistance that hit around 6,000 Jews. Elisabeth's humanitarianism extended beyond Jewish rescue to broader civilian aid, echoing her World War I efforts. She supported underground networks, providing food rations and medical supplies, often using palace resources to distribute aid discreetly amid rationing and black market economies. As the occupation dragged on, with Allied bombings intensifying from 1943, she visited bomb shelters and hospitals, offering comfort in a manner reminiscent of her Angel of the Field Hospitals title. The psychological toll was immense. Living under surveillance, she grappled with isolation, family separation. Her daughter, Marie-Josée, was in Italy, sons in education abroad, and the moral dilemmas of occupation. Yet her resolve stemmed from a deep-seated empathy forged in childhood clinics. As Brussels was liberated in September 1944 by Allied forces, primarily the British XXX Corps under General Brian Horrocks as part of Operation Market Garden's Northern Push, Elisabeth's actions shifted to supporting the liberators. The city fell on September 3rd to 4th after minimal resistance, with jubilant crowds welcoming tanks amid the retreat of German forces. Elisabeth opened Laeken Palace to British XXX Corps, providing quarters for officers and staff in the palace's wings, transforming royal salons into command posts and dormitories. This gesture not only aided logistics, but symbolized Belgian gratitude, boosting morale among troops weary from the Normandy campaign. In a whimsical touch that captured headlines, she gifted General Horrocks a wild boar piglet named Chewing Gum, which became the unit's beloved mascot. The piglet sourced from the palace grounds forests, accompanied the corps through subsequent battles, even appearing in photos with soldiers, embodying the lighter side of liberation amid ruins. Her humanitarianism extended to aiding displaced persons, coordinating with the Red Cross to distribute supplies and reunite families, echoing her World War I orphanages. By war's end, in May 1945, Belgium faced devastation, over 80,000 dead, infrastructure in tatters. But Elisabeth's role had solidified her as a unifying figure, bridging occupation resistance with reconstruction. Post-war Belgium grappled with Reconstruction and Cold War divisions, emerging from 5 years of occupation into a bipolar world where Allied victory gave way to ideological rifts between the capitalist West and communist East. The immediate aftermath involved denazification trials, economic recovery via the Marshall Plan. Belgium received $559 million from 1948 to 1951, and political turmoil over Leopold III's royal question, which polarized the nation between monarchists and republicans. As Queen Mother, Elisabeth championed science and health, stepping into a role of elder stateswoman that emphasized intellectual and humanitarian pursuits over political controversy. She funded research on blindness, polio, cancer, and tuberculosis, honoring her father's legacy as an ophthalmologist through foundations that advanced medical breakthroughs. The Queen Elizabeth Medical Foundation, established in 1926 but revitalized post-war, supported laboratories and grants focusing on neurology and cardiology with endowments from her personal fortune and public donations. For blindness, she backed ophthalmic studies at universities like Louvain, inspired by her father's clinics. For polio, amid the 1950s epidemics, she funded vaccine research echoing Jonas Salk's work. Cancer and TB initiatives included radiology advancements and sanatoriums, reducing mortality rates in Belgium. These efforts were not mere patronage. Elisabeth's hands-on involvement, visiting labs and corresponding with researchers, reflected a belief in science as a tool for healing war scars, psychologically aiding national recovery by fostering hope. Meetings with pioneers like Marie Curie, whom she had known earlier through mutual scientific circles, Niels Bohr, Paul Langevin, and Lord Rutherford fueled her intellectual curiosity. Correspondences with them delved into atomic ethics and human progress. Curie met pre-war at Solvay conferences, discussed radium's medical applications. Post-war letters. Curie died in 1934, but her influence persisted via legacy. Bohr, the Danish physicist who fled Nazis in 1943, visited Belgium in the 1950s, debating nuclear energy's dual use amid Cold War arms races. Langevin, a French socialist physicist, corresponded on pacifism. Rutherford, the father of nuclear physics, influenced her views on atomic research before his 1937 death, with post-war exchanges via his students. These interactions, often at Brussels symposiums, explored ethics, e.g., Bohr's open-world principle versus weaponization, mirroring Elisabeth's wartime horrors and post-war peace advocacy. Her travels in the 1950s ignited controversies, challenging her apolitical image in a divided world. Visits to the Soviet Union in 1958, becoming the first royal welcomed at the Kremlin by Nikita Khrushchev, Poland and China in 1955, where she met Mao Zedong amid the Great Leap Forward, branded her the Red Queen among conservatives. The USSR trip during de-Stalinization involved cultural exchanges like ballet performances and discussions on space race. Sputnik launched in 1957. But critics in Belgium's right-wing press accused her of legitimizing communism, especially post-Hungarian Revolution, 1956. In Poland, 1955 or later visits, she engaged with Warsaw Pact officials on reconstruction, drawing ire from anti-communist exiles. The China visit, amid Sino-Soviet alliance, included Beijing tours and Mao meetings where she advocated peace. Headlines screamed betrayal given Taiwan tensions. She supported the Belgian Soviet Friendship Society, attending events and posing with a communist newspaper like Le Drapeau Rouge, fueling royalist outrage. Critics, including Catholic politicians, accused her of political naivety and communist leanings, damaging Belgium's NATO alignment, joined 1949. Headlines decried her as damaging to Belgium's image, but Elisabeth rebuffed them. I love to travel and meet people from all over the world, and more defiantly, I always do what I want. These trips aimed at fostering peace, reflecting her independent spirit shaped by two wars' futility, and aligned with global détente efforts like the 1955 Geneva Summit. Balancing this, her 1959 visit to Israel as the first royal guest highlighted her humanitarian credentials, discussing shared histories of resilience with President Yitzhak Ben-Zvi amid post-Holocaust rebuilding. In Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, she toured kibbutzim and memorials, reinforcing her righteous status. In 1958, she patronized the World Child Welfare Congress in Brussels, advocating for global youth protections, emphasizing education and health in decolonizing Africa and Asia. Elisabeth's vitality persisted into old age. At 80, she practiced yoga, introduced via Indian diplomats, took long hikes in the Ardennes, swam in cold waters for circulation, and maintained a regimen of physical and mental exercises, like crossword puzzles and reading philosophy. A private delight was sculpting busts of her grandchildren, infusing clay with their personalities through meticulous detail, a therapeutic outlet amid family duties. She witnessed Leopold III's abdication in July 1951 amid post-war criticism of his surrender, a plebiscite in 1950 showing divided support, 57% for return, but Walloon opposition led to riots, with her grandson Baudouin ascending at 20, whom she mentored in ethics. Health issues emerged, minor heart ailments from the 1950s, but her spirit remained unbroken until November 23, 1965, when a heart attack claimed her at 89 in Brussels at Stuyvenberg Castle. Her funeral at the Church of Our Lady of Laeken drew European royals, including Queen Juliana, Grand Duke Jean, and throngs of Belgians, with a procession from the royal palace viewed by thousands, Cardinal Léon-Joseph Swinens praising her as Queen of Scholars, and the unfortunate of artists and writers with an infinite heart. The service, blending Catholic rites with national anthems, reflected her ecumenical life, interred in the royal crypt beside Albert. Elisabeth's legacy endures as a beacon of humanitarianism and cultural patronage. Her wartime roles set benchmarks for royal involvement, influencing contemporaries and successors like Queen Matilda, who echoes her social engagements. The Queen Elizabeth Music Competition, held annually in Brussels, nurtures global talents, while her Egyptological Foundation propelled discoveries in archaeology. Medical funds she established continue to combat diseases, saving countless lives. Culturally, she bridged divides, sustaining arts during crises and unifying Belgium's linguistic factions through shared patronage. Politically, her Red Queen era challenged Cold War binaries, promoting dialogue in a polarized world. Her contradictions, a German-born defender of Belgium, a grieving widow-turned-activist, a royal defying convention, underscore empathy's transformative power. Ultimately, Elizabeth's life imparts lessons in resilience, the fortitude to comfort the dying, confront injustice, and unearth beauty amid despair. Her narrative, like a violin's resonant chord, inspires living with compassion in a divided era, affirming that true influence stems from heartfelt connections rather than coronets,